Chapter 1. Strange Beginnings. My name is Sally, and I never believed in the strange, the mysterious, or the unexplainable, until the winter I turned 14. That was the year my family and I moved into an old house perched on the edge of the hills in New Zealand, the kind of house that creaks with the wind, that whispers secrets through its wooden walls, and that seems alive when no one is around. We were a simple family: my mother, my father, my younger brother Richard, my Gran, and me. Gran was very old, nearly 82, and she had a way of telling stories that made the hairs on my neck stand up. Most of the time, her tales were about our grandfather George, my mother's father, who had passed away before I was born. Gran always claimed that George had never really left us, that he still wandered around the garden, especially at night. I never paid much attention to her stories. Ghosts, spirits, walking through the garden. How could anyone believe such things? I would ask her, "Gran, how do you know it's him? Could it be an animal?" Her eyes would twinkle mysteriously. "Because I can see his footprints," she would say. George had enormous feet, she insisted, big feet that made distinct marks in the soil. We all laughed at the idea. Big feet or not, we had never seen them. Gran's eyesight was failing, we told ourselves. Perhaps it was nothing more than her imagination. Winter came suddenly that year. Snow fell like a thick white blanket, covering the hills and the garden. The air was icy, the wind sharp, and our house seemed to shiver beneath its old timber frame. One morning I went to the kitchen to make breakfast. I opened the door and froze. The kitchen looked like a storm had passed through. Pots were overturned, the fridge door swung open, and everything inside, milk, vegetables, bread, was ruined. Some of it had spoiled overnight, covered in frost, or turned sour. My heart pounded. I wasn't imagining this. Mom rushed in behind me, her face pale. "Oh dear, what happened here?" she exclaimed. Dad appeared next, frowning and bewildered. "Who did this?" "Richard," he asked, glancing at my brother, who looked just as shocked. "Don't look at me, Dad," I said, my voice trembling. I was in bed all night. At that moment, Gran shuffled in. "Good morning, everyone," she said cheerfully, glancing at the chaos. Oh my, what a sight! We all began picking up the mess. As we worked, the strange feeling grew heavier. Something was not right. Dad checked the fridge again. "Everything in here is spoiled. It was fine yesterday. What is going on?" We didn't have an answer. That night, sleep came fitfully. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, and shadows stretched across the walls. At 3 a.m, Richard burst into my room, wide-eyed and pale. "Come quickly, there's someone in my room." I followed him, my heart racing. Mom and Dad joined us, and together we entered Richard's room. His computer lay on the floor, books scattered, and drawers emptied. "Someone's been here," Richard whispered. Dad frowned. "I'll call the police," he said, though even he seemed uncertain. But the police found nothing unusual in the area. For 2 days the house remained strangely quiet. Then on the 3rd day, small things began to happen. The radio made unusual noises, the TV flickered and went dead, and during dinner the lights suddenly went out. Mom screamed, Dad scowled, and Gran simply smiled. "It's George," she said quietly. We laughed nervously. How could a grandfather who had passed away move through the house? Later that night, I heard it again. The soft creak of floorboards, the faint whisper of movement in the living room. I woke Richard. "Listen," I said. "Someone's downstairs." We crept down together. The living room was a mess. Chairs tipped over. The table moved. The pictures and radio scattered. The door to the garden stood open, swaying in the wind. Mom, Dad, and Gran arrived shortly after. Dad shook his head in disbelief. "Someone's in the garden," he muttered. We ran outside. The snow underfoot seemed to ripple, as if the ground itself were alive. And then we saw them, large footprints in the snow, huge, unmistakable. They led from the garden door into the yard and disappeared into the hills beyond. Gran smiled, pointing at the tracks. "George helped us," she said softly. "He took us out of the house, safe." I stared at the snow. Big feet, my grandfather's feet, leaving prints in the snow. And for the first time I believed her stories. "Thank you, Granddad," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the wind. "Thank you for keeping us safe." And in that moment, I understood that some mysteries were real, some stories were true, and some footprints could never be explained, at least not by logic alone.
Chapter 2. Shadows in the Snow. The morning after the strange footprints appeared, our house felt heavier, as if the walls themselves remembered the previous night's events. I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the old timbers made my heart leap, and every gust of wind seemed like a whisper calling from the hills. Even Richard was quiet, sitting by the window and staring out at the snow-covered garden as though expecting George to appear again. Gran, meanwhile, moved about the house as if nothing unusual had happened. She prepared breakfast, humming softly, her eyes twinkling with a secret knowledge we weren't meant to understand. "He only wants to protect us," she said, smiling at me. "Even now George is watching over this house." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to be brave. But the events of the past few nights had planted seeds of doubt deep in my mind. Were these footprints really my grandfather's? Or was there something else, something unseen, moving through the snow and shadows? That afternoon, the snow had softened, leaving the footprints clearer than ever. I went outside to examine them. They were enormous, far larger than any person in our family, and their shape was unmistakable. Each step pressed firmly into the ground, as if the weight of the soul walking had left a mark. The footprints led from the garden to the edge of the hill behind our house, and then they disappeared into the trees, as if swallowed by the winter mist. "Look at these!" I called to Richard. He came running, his breath visible in the cold air. "They're huge," he said, kneeling beside me. "Do you really think it's him, Granddad?" I didn't answer. How could I? Even as I studied the tracks, I felt a strange shiver of anticipation. There was a rhythm to them, a pattern that seemed almost deliberate. Someone, or something, was moving with purpose, not wandering aimlessly.
That night, the house seemed alive again. The wind howled, rattling the windows, and shadows danced along the walls. Gran had already gone to bed, leaving the candles flickering in the living room. I stayed awake, listening to the faint sounds from outside. A soft, crunching noise reached my ears. Footsteps in the snow. Cautiously, I crept to the window. There, in the dim moonlight, I saw the footprints again. This time, they appeared closer, moving around the edge of the garden, circling the house as if testing the boundaries. My heart raced. I wanted to run, to call for Mom and Dad, but some instinct held me back. I felt that I was supposed to witness this, that I was part of whatever mystery was unfolding. Suddenly the lights in the kitchen flickered. I jumped. then slowly moved toward the stairs, gripping the banister tightly. A shadow passed across the doorway, fleeting and silent. It was too big to be Richard, too precise to be a trick of the wind. I whispered, "Granddad." But there was no reply. Only the crunching continued, closer now, stopping at the edge of the garden door. Then, without warning, the door creaked open. A cold gust of wind swept inside, scattering the papers on the table. I froze. The footprints had returned, but there was no one visible. The snow outside was still, undisturbed, as though the footprints had been made by a phantom who could walk in the air. I ran to Gran's room. She was awake, sitting up in bed as if she had been expecting me. "It's him, isn't it?" I whispered. "Granddad." She nodded slowly, her eyes calm and wise. "Yes, Sally. He never left, and he only comes when he knows we are in danger." Danger? The word echoed in my mind. I remembered the scattered kitchen, the ruined fridge, the broken TV. Something or someone had been trying to frighten us. But it wasn't malevolent. The footprints, the strange noises, the moving objects, they were warnings, signs that something important was about to happen. Gran's hand on my shoulder was warm and steady. "You must trust him," she said, "and you must watch. Pay attention to every sound, every mark in the snow. George will guide us." That night, I understood for the first time that the house, the hills, and the snow were all part of a story older than me. A story in which my family, my grandfather, and I were now entangled. The footprints were more than marks in the snow. They were messages, clues, reminders that even in the coldest, darkest nights, protection and love can take shapes we cannot see. I couldn't sleep again, but I watched. And in the silent, snowy darkness, I felt the presence of a guardian walking silently beside us, unseen but very real. And for the first time, I believed in the impossible. Chapter 3. The Guardian's Footprints. The morning dawned quietly, but the air was thick with anticipation. After the strange events of the previous nights, we approached the day with a strange mix of fear and hope. The snow lay thick over the garden, sparkling in the weak winter sun, and the footprints remained, massive and unmistakable, winding across the white field. I felt a shiver run down my spine each time I looked at them, for they were not just the footprints of a man. They were the imprints of someone extraordinary, someone who cared enough to intervene when danger loomed. Gran moved calmly around the house as if nothing had changed, but there was a certain gravity in her manner. She poured tea with deliberate care, her eyes scanning the snow outside. "Stay close to each other," she advised, her voice soft but firm. "George is still here, and he watches over us." Richard and I exchanged a look. He seemed more unsettled than usual, nervously glancing at the windows and listening to the slightest sounds. It was true. After the broken TV, the overturned furniture, and the strange noises, none of us could shake the feeling that our home had become a stage for something otherworldly. The day passed slowly, each hour stretching into the next. We tried to occupy ourselves, but every so often we would glance outside to see the footprints, now partially melted by the sun, but still impressively clear. They led from the garden to the small shed at the edge of the property, then vanished into the soft white of the hills beyond. My heart pounded with every step I imagined the footprints taking. That night, a terrible storm swept over the hills. The wind howled like a living thing, rattling the windows and shaking the old beams. The house trembled under the gusts, and for a moment We thought it might be the end. Mom held Gran tightly, while Dad checked the doors and windows, muttering reassurances that did little to convince us. Suddenly a strange rumbling echoed through the ground. At first we thought it was the wind, but then the vibration grew stronger, rolling beneath the house like a living pulse. "What is it?" I cried, clutching Richard's hand. Gran rose slowly, her eyes fixed on the snow-covered garden. "It is him," she whispered. "George." The ground shook violently, furniture tipped, pictures fell, and the windows rattled. We could hear the cracking of wood as the house groaned under the force. Then, as if guided by some invisible hand, the shaking became focused. The base of the house split along a line leading to the garden. Snow and earth shifted, as if a giant had walked through, and there, in the dim light, we saw them, more footprints, enormous and perfectly formed, leading us away from the house. "It's him," Richard shouted, pointing. "He's taking us out." Mom grabbed my hand, and Dad held Gran. We followed the path of the massive footprints through the snow, our hearts pounding with fear and excitement. Every step brought us closer to safety, guided by a force we could not see, but instinctively trusted. Then, with a deafening crash, the house collapsed behind us, splintering into the snow, as if the earth itself had swallowed it. We froze for a moment, staring in disbelief, all our possessions, our home of so many years, gone in an instant, and yet, despite the destruction, we were safe. Gran looked down at the ground, her eyes glistening. "See," she said softly, pointing to the snow. "The footprints. He has brought us through." We followed the path to a small clearing, and there they ended abruptly. The footprints were enormous, tapering to nothing, and there was no sign of George. But the sense of his presence remained, palpable and comforting, as if he had been walking beside us all along. "I can't believe it," I whispered, staring at the empty snow. "He saved us. But how?" Gran smiled, placing a hand on my shoulder. "George has always been with us. He walks beside those he loves, even when we cannot see him. The footprints are a reminder, a message, that even in our darkest hours, protection and love are never far away." That night we made a small fire in the open, huddling together and looking at the footprints fading under the soft snowfall. The house was gone, but our family remained intact. And as I traced the fading shapes of the footprints with my eyes, I whispered a quiet thank you to my grandfather, a hero who had walked with us in the shadows, leaving only his enormous footprints as a testament to his love. In the following days, we rebuilt our lives, carrying the memory of the footprints with us. We laughed, we cried, and we marveled at the mystery of it all. And whenever the snow fell thickly over the hills, I would glance outside and wonder if, perhaps, the footprints would appear once more, a silent guardian watching over us, just as George always had. And in that moment, I knew one truth that would stay with me forever. Love, courage, and family are the strongest forces of all, even more powerful than fear, destruction, or the unknown. And sometimes, the smallest gestures, like footprints in the snow, could carry the weight of a lifetime of protection.